10-mark question, Edexcel, is going to appear once on your paper 1 and once on your paper 2. This question will always have the command word assess. It is an assess question, and it is also the first question on your paper to be marked in levels. So the 5 and the 8 marker are not marked in levels, but this 10 marker is marked in levels, which means you're marked in terms of the depth of your response rather than whether the response is right or wrong, which is how the 5 and the 8 marker are marked. So how are the marks allocated for the 10-mark question? This would be 2K, 2 application marks, 2 analysis marks, and the only difference to the 8-mark question, there are 4 evaluation marks, just meaning you're going to have to write a bit more in depth, maybe 1 more point of evaluation. With regards to the paragraph structure, if you write in depth, you can 100% get away with 1 analysis paragraph and 1 evaluation point. Just of course, make sure you do the simple things right, like writing step-by-step chains of analysis, ensuring you have enough depth and a nice developed evaluation point. As for this question, remember you're getting assessed on the depth, how step by step you can write, not how many points you write. Now, the only exception to the rule for writing 1 analysis paragraph and 1 evaluation is questions that basically ask you for 2 reasons, and there's a few of these. The majority of them you can get away with 1 analysis paragraphs, but some questions are basically explicitly asking you to write 2 paragraphs, and I'll show you the examples of this. So one of them is the specimen paper, the first specimen paper that came out. If we go to page 16, so yeah, this is the 12 marker, where we find 10 marker. Okay, so this is the 10 marker. Apart from price discrimination, it says 1 pricing strategy and 1 non-price strategy Cineworld could adopt to increase sales. So this, like I said, this, what I would do 1 paragraph on pricing strategy and 1 paragraph on non-pricing strategy. And if you get a question where you're explicitly asked to basically do 2 paragraphs, you do not have to go as much into depth as you would go with 1 paragraph, as you need to remember with a 10 marker it's still around a mark a minute, so you can't allocate too much time. You won't be able to write 2 fully in-depth paragraphs in 10 minutes. So around 4 to 5 lines, a decent amount in each paragraph, a decent amount of depth is fine. Just don't go too overboard, because remember you have to keep in mind the timing. So another example of this is, there's lots of examples. There's June 2017 paper 1. This is June 2018 paper 1. If we go to section B here, so just scroll down to the 10 marker. So 10 marker, with reference to extract B, assess how regulation of the energy supplies profits is likely to affect consumers and suppliers in the energy market. So another example there. There's lots of examples of this, even a recent one which I remember off the top of my head, June 2023 paper 2. I'm pretty sure that asks for 2 reasons as well. But just a reminder, if they ask for 2 reasons, don't write as much in depth as you need to remember, and the main thing, timing is still around a mark a minute. You can save any time on the 10 marker, the better, as you can spend it on those long answer questions, but a minute a mark if possible. And also remember our strategy with timing, do not go above 10 minutes. That is the maximum threshold, as you do not want to ruin your other questions for a 10 mark. Moving on, let's look through an example of a 10 marker and I'll show you how I would answer it. I know a lot of you guys like these examples, so I'll keep doing them. So let's move on to section B. This is June 2020 paper 1. It should be around 12. Okay, so we have section B here, and let's look at the 10 mark question. So it is there. So assess whether complete nationalisation of the rail industry might protect employees. So what is the main thing this question is asking me about? So what the main topic areas basically? What the biggest one is nationalisation and protecting employees. So how, and again, this is what I would do in every question. Try to internalize the question, so when you're looking through the extracts, you know you're actively looking, so you actually know what you're looking for, rather than, because what a lot of students do, they read the question, move on straight away to the extracts, but halfway through reading the extracts they'll completely forget the question and just continue reading. You want to have the question in your mind, because you can only think of answers if you know what the question is. So in my mind right now, nationalisation and how it protects employees. Let's go through the extracts and try find an extract that's relevant. So firstly, remember what we do. We look at the title. If the title sounds relevant, we read the extract and try find some information regarding it. So we'll start from the top. UK rail industry. UK rail industry. I'm not really too interested in the figures right now, but I guess this is decent because it shows a case for nationalisation. Rail, that's not very relevant. Peak, that's not very relevant there. Case for nationalisation. that is probably quite relevant. But remember, we're talking about employees, so there might be a more relevant one. This is very short, so I'm just going to read it. So the boss paid. Let's have a scan through this. Yeah, also, if there's not like one perfectly relevant, you are just going to have to scan through the extracts. Achieve something. Okay, spend a lot of money. Okay, here. So this is increased cost of nationalisation and a maximum wage for executive at companies with the government contracts. Now, that is a very good point, and that is probably what I'm going to use for my paragraph, because remember, it was talking about why we should nationalise and how it's going to protect employees. One way it could protect employees is a maximum wage for executives. Now, if your economics knowledge is good, that will make sense, because a lower level economist might think a maximum wage is actually going to be negative for employees. But if you think about it, we talk about executives, so like the managers here. If the managers have a maximum wage, so this manager is getting paid £495,000 a year. If he gets a maximum wage and his wage is reduced, what is the effect likely to be on other employees? If we set a maximum wage, and I'll show this on a quick labour markets diagram. So, of course, because we're talking about wages, we're talking about employees, it will not just be price and quantity, it will be wage up here, and that's a W, and it will be quantity of labour. I'm just not going to write the entire thing out. So supply, demand, and remember, because this is labour markets, a supply of labour, demand for labour. Try to always keep in mind, as soon as you draw a labour markets diagram, who is doing the supplying, who is doing the demanding. So now we're setting a maximum wage. So where is a maximum wage going to be set? A maximum wage is going to be set below the equilibrium wage. And why is that? We're trying to reduce these managers' wages. So the only way we can reduce these managers' wages, because their wages are here right now. Their wages are at equilibrium. So the only way we can reduce their wages is set the maximum wage below the equilibrium wage. Now, by setting this maximum wage, so W max, so the wage at maximum, what effects is it going to have on the market? How is it going to lead to a disequilibrium? So if we look at this now, so look at this point here where the maximum wage intersects the quantity axis, which I would label this QS of labour, then where the maximum wage intersects the demand curve, this is QD of labour. Now remember, as I said earlier, who does the supplying is us, it's the human, is the labour that does the supplying, and then who does the demanding in labour markets? It is the firms. So now, if we look at this diagram, QD is greater than QS. There's excess quantity demanded and there is a lack of quantity supplied. So what does this show? It of course shows excess demand for labour. And what is another word for an excess demand of labour? It is a shortage of labour. And now, as we're talking about managers, we're talking about executives. If there's a lack of managers, if there's a lack of these high-level executives which are doing those high important roles, how is it going to have? It's going to have a trickle-down, a knock-on effect on these employees. Things like lack of organisation, several other negative effects. So, in conclusion, this is how I'd answer the question. I would say nationalisation is going to lead to negative effects on employees. So it's not going to protect employees if they implement a maximum wage, or as they implement a maximum wage. Now, you don't necessarily need a diagram in 10 marker, but since this explains the concept so well, and literally we're talking about maximum wages, you would 100% draw this in. But my main point I want to mention here, if you're drawing this in, like I just mentioned verbally in my chain of analysis, you need to use all these points. Even the point I explained about the maximum wage being below the equilibrium, you can't even write that. But all these points like W max, QS, QD, saying it's excess demand, which actually means a shortage. When I mentioned the market moved from equilibrium, which you can even label that if you really wanted to, if you had the time, you can label that 955k because that is the equilibrium point at that market, and just talk about how the market moves from equilibrium to disequilibrium. You can even write here wage if you want to. These are all application marks. You can even write here wage for executives, wage for managers, quantity supplied, or quantity of labour of managers. Just adding as much application. But the main thing is using these points in your chains of analysis. Don't just say a maximum wage is going to lead to excess demand for labour. Explain the whole thing, use the points, show it, say where it's between. From QS to QD is the excess demand for labour. So, of course, for this question, there will also be, so we would have picked about 6 KAA marks there, but now there is also 4 evaluation marks. You can get these 4 evaluation marks from looking through the context. There probably are quite a few points in the context here that you can evaluate evaluate using, but I haven't read through the context. A really good one here is actually just to do with the diagram. So there's loads of these evaluation points, just pre-learned evaluation. I will one day make a massive video on like loads of evaluation points that you just pick up by just doing thousands of hours of economics. But a really good one here is where we set the maximum wage. And so the way I'd word it is, however, in evaluation, this depends where the government sets the maximum wage. As if we think back to our analysis point, because what is evaluation? Evaluation is a counter argument, is finding a limitation of basically what you've said in your chains of analysis. In our chains of analysis, we've said quite simply, a maximum wage is going to lead to excess demand, and that excess demand is going to have negative effects on employees. But if we can find a limitation in this chain of analysis and something to do with the excess demand. So here, like I said, however, in evaluation, this depends where we set this maximum wage. As if the maximum wage is not actually that low. So for example, if we set it somewhere like here, how does that change now the effects of the maximum wage? So now if we look at it, quantity supplied is here and quantity demanded is here, which means the gap is now reduced. So the magnitude of the negative effects has been reduced a lot. Why? Because the gap has gone from this black arrow, this massive black arrow, to this tiny red arrow now. Thus, it means that employees won't actually be that bad off. Why? Because there's only going to be a small decrease in the amount of managers, and so most of the tasks are going to get done, like organisation should be fine, etc, etc. And just actually thinking about it, why is that evaluation? We've said the maximum wage is going to have a massive negative effect, massive excess demand, but in reality, and that is why it's a limitation of it, in reality, is it really going to have that much of a negative effect? No, and that's why it's evaluation. But that is a bit of a tricky point, so if you really don't understand it, leave me a comment and I will try to explain it in a bit more of a simple manner. So at this point, I still haven't read the extract, but let's break this down very simply. There are a lot of words there for a very simple question. So since mid-2015, waffle, assess the likely impact of... So the important words here are appreciation of a currency on the balance of payments. So basically the question is quite simply, a very simple theory question, is asking you, how is an appreciation of a currency going to affect the balance of payments? And the first thing I'm going to think about when I'm thinking about appreciation is this acronym, so SPICY. So everyone has a bit of a, every teacher teaches a bit of a weird variation to this. But SPICY, stronger pound, imports cheaper, exports expensive. So of course an appreciation is going to mean the pound is stronger, so like I said, imports cheaper, exports expensive. Now let's link this to our balance of payments knowledge. What is that going to lead to? So if imports are cheaper, it's going to lead to more import expenditure. Why? Because things are cheaper. If you think about demand, we say when prices fall, demand increases, so people are going to import more because it's cheaper to import. Then if you think about exports, exports are more expensive. Again, think about demand. Think about the inverse law. We say with demand of price and quantity. So when price increases, people decrease quantity demanded. Therefore, we're going to have less export revenue. Why? Because exports are more expensive, so people want less of them. And I will just basically explain that in my chain of analysis. So just what I said, about imports cheaper, exports more expensive, and of course, how is that going to overall affect the balance of payments? The current account is going to lead to a worsened current account, therefore distort our balance of payments. And this really shows you, as long as you have a decent basis of economics knowledge, these 10-mark questions are really quite easy. And the main thing to keep in mind is obviously just the timing. Just make sure you get them done in under 10 minutes. But of course here, we still haven't addressed, like I keep forgetting, the 4 evaluation marks here. So how would we pick up these 4 evaluation marks? But also just evaluation points, if you've watched my evaluation video, it runs you through my framework of how I used to evaluate. Like when I thought about evaluation, I used to think about things like time frame, PED, and I believe PED works here really well. Why? Because one of our points is saying that when exports are more expensive, it means less foreign consumers are willing to purchase them. But the main thing that depends on is the elasticity of our exports. As if our exports are extremely inelastic, for example, medicines like pharmaceuticals, even if the price increases, like for example, the price increases of a cancer drug, like a certain percentage, you're still likely to buy this because you have a degree of inelastic demand towards it. And this is a limitation, a contradiction to basically everything we said. So we could say an appreciation of the euro will not actually worsen the current account, the balance of payments, as it could if our demand for our exports inelastic. It could actually boost our current account revenue. Why? It could boost our export revenue. Why? Because things are getting more expensive, because exports are still more expensive, but individuals are continuing to purchase them. Therefore, it could actually lead to the inverse effect, which is improving our current account, improving our balance of payments, and that is what I call a very good evaluation point. And for those of you that like to see how I would actually word it in the exam, it's probably something like this. So however, this depends on the PD of exports, and you can read the rest yourself, but that's how I'd write in the exam. That is a 10 marker done. Any questions, leave them down below.